Good evening and welcome. I'm Zoe Davis from the Head of the River Race, and on behalf of the committee and Active Tools, I would like to welcome you to what we hope is going to be an absolutely fantastic night. I've got two top quality experts for you, but before I introduce them, I also want to let you know about our partnership with AllMarkOne, who are doing our live stream for us tonight. So for those of you who are in the room, you'll be invited by our experts to give your questions. And for those of you watching online tonight or during catch-up, you can put your questions into the discussion box here on the right-hand side. So the Head of the River Race started in 1926, and the first race had 21 crews in it, and the winner of that first race was London Rowing Club, where we are here tonight. That 4.25 mile course has been raced by crews, tens and thousands of crews now from all around the world, from the USA right through to China. The average time is 19 minutes and 20 seconds. The record, which somebody asked us on the Instagram earlier this week, is 16 minutes and 37 seconds. And who got that one? The national team, the British national team in 1987. Okay, 2018 was a bit of an interesting year. We had, for the second time on record, a dead heat between Oxford Brookes University Boat Club and Leander Club. So, before I introduce to you your two experts tonight, we're going to take a quick look at the race of 2018.
So we're going to control it in this first 1,000, so we warm up, squeeze and set.
4, 3, hit it, now. Yeah, coming on. Right boys, we got 45 coming up. I want that turn.
Stand on it! Shut to! Shut to! Control and aggression on that foot plate.
Legs hard. Legs hard. Legs hard.
Foot plate! Foot plate! Every stroke, heads up, big legs. Driving for that finish. This is our reset point at Hammersmith. This is where our race restarts. And we're going for home, going for that pennant.
Right boy, on the black boy. Tier 1, sit back. Send it. Send it. Let's go.
Through the line. Attack it.
Last move and down.
Okay, your first expert tonight. She has over 10 years' experience of coxing and coaching on the tideway. She started at Latimer Upper as a rower and then went on to Cox and won gold at Nat Schools. The thing I probably know her most for, and one of her greatest achievements, is she went to Cambridge University and won the boat race. Can I welcome Sophie Shapter? Okay, your second expert tonight. He started his career coxing and rowing at the age of 15 at Bedford School. He went through York and Leicester Uni, and he came back here to London Rowing Club, where he won Henley Royal Regatta in the Thames Cup. He got his first GB vest in 2007 in Jurgen Super 8 at the Amsterdam World Cup. London 2012, he won a bronze Olympic medal, and at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, he got the gold. Closer to home, he has 5 Head of the River wins, 4 women's head wins, but a silver medal at Nat Schools. Ladies and gentlemen, Phelan Hill.
We're going to kind of talk through sort of everything that you would need to know for the race, so including your race prep, and we're just going to talk it through as if it was the day, basically, but in super slow motion, or super quick motion, I suppose. So we're going to start off, first of all, with what would you pack for the race? So there's so much to think about and remember, but this is quite an important thing. So, Phelan, what would you pack for your race?
Oh my word, what wouldn't I pack?
Well,
I tend to go overboard actually on my packing. So for me, the first thing I always think about is normally at this time of year, it's pretty cold. So always pack plenty of kit. And actually I do a pre-race paddle and normally before the race. So I'll normally double up on all my kit. So I have 2 of everything just in case it's a bit wet. So you don't want to be going out racing with wet kit. Then on top of that, standard things, obviously life jacket, I'll have my COTS orb all charged, any other GPS instruments, tools, works, actually and a little bit of snacky food as well, because I always get a bit hungry as well.
Yeah. What kind of tools? What would you bring in the boat with you?
Oof, so it will differ actually between pre-race and on the race. So I will have, for sort of like pre-race paddling and when I'm just around the boat, I have a very big toolkit which pretty much has every single type of item possible, spanners, screwdrivers, sandpaper, inserts, you name it, it's probably in my toolbox. And then actually I've actually got 3 tool bags. And then when I go on the water for a pre-paddle, I'll have a smaller condensed tool bag which just has 10mm spanners, 13mm spanners, screwdrivers, tape measures, a little bit more bare essentials. And then when it gets to the race time, I'm sort of like getting leaner, I don't want to carry too much weight, so then I go down to the essentials, and then I'll have just an open 10mm and an open 13mm.
Yeah.
And then depending on the race and the importance, if it's a really, really big race, Olympics or a very competitive time for 8's head, and I want to make like very small marginals, I'll go and chuck the tools at the start. So.
Wow, okay, fair enough. Okay, in terms of planning then, so obviously you and your coach have sort of figured out some sort of race plan, so you've obviously got that kind of plan. Do you take that anything to remind you in the boat, or is that something that you know, or would you recommend that people do that?
Generally for me, I will know the race plan. So when we talk about like pre-race, I always think actually pre-race happens a lot further before the actual race. So if you're just talking about a race plan on the day, that's too late. You need to be thinking about the race plan a week before, 2 weeks before. And if that's something you haven't done at the moment, I'd recommend you sitting down with your coach, start discussing it. And then I'm always a great believer that in your actual race scenario, there should be nothing that comes as a surprise. So any calls that you want to make in the race, you should have already practiced in training. And actually, I always think about my race plan as just being sort of like a more condensed, concise version of what you practice in training. So if for the last 3 weeks, the coach has really been focusing on the front end, on the catch and the leg rhythm, well, they're just sort of like the calls that I'll go and focus on. So I think it's really about just building that up over the week. So that's already the beginning of my pre-race prep.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think also something else that's really important on the day is kind of think about your timings as well. So there's so many different things that you might be doing. So like you said, going for a pre-race paddle, you need to make sure you know what time you've got to be at your host club or at your club, you know, what time you're boating, what time you're going to get off to get enough recovery, have some snacks, get warm, and then kind of think about all the other things that go with sort of before the race. So I always think you need to factor in so much faff time because you've got 8 people to kind of look after and make sure that you know where they all are, and inevitably 1 or 2 are going to go wandering off. So you need to make sure, I don't know, this is what I did for a lot of my races, that you have like a set time that you put into your WhatsApp group or whatever, and you're like, right, 9:05, everyone's going to be in the gym, I'm going to get kit on, I'm going to get ready to race. 9:10, you go for your last wee or whatever you need to do in the toilet, and then 9:15, we're going to have our last final chat, and then 9:30, we're going to hands on and we're going to go for it. Like I quite like to time it out like that. Do you think that's...
I'm absolutely meticulous in that.
Yeah.
So if you work backwards as a general rule of thumb, so I always start with when's my race time. So for sort of like the 8's head coming up, that's like 11:30, and then I sort of like work backwards from that. So I always think about, first thing you've got to think about is what time you're going to get hands on the boat, and that's normally for me. I generally end up boating around Hammersmith way, but obviously it depends on where you are host club. But from Hammersmith, I'll always think I need to be boating 45 minutes before. If I'm boating 45 minutes before, I generally buy the boat 60 minutes before. And then 90 minutes before, I'm already in race kit, I've sorted out my numbers, I've given my numbers to my bowman. And so, as sort of like Sophie says, you've got like a whole timetable for the day. Because I think one of the things is you find with racing is that on race day, it's generally just always stressful. There's always things going on. And I'm a great believer in being able to sort of like control all the controllables. So you want to remove as much stress as possible. So that means just knowing the planning. So you don't want athletes coming up to you saying, when are we doing this? When are we doing a crew chat? Or the worst thing that ever happens, and I'm sure it happened to everyone, is that this still happened to me in the team. There's a few people who are always late. But you'd be wanting to sit down for your last crew chat 60 minutes before a race. It's just a 5 minutes, gee everyone up. And then there's someone late, and it's just like, ugh. So it's all about really making sure you're trying to control the controllables, get everyone there, give signals for when they want to wee, and then actually to the point as well that when you get on the water, you want to know how you want to warm up. So similarly again, like every single race I've ever done, I've got a really set routine. I know how long it's going to take me to go and do that. So it's a bit easier on a 2K course, but I know for a fact that when I used to race on a 2K course, my warm-up would take 3.8 kilometers to complete everything. And I actually mapped out when I would go up and whether it'd be a UT1 or whether I was coming down with the course and I'd be doing bursts. So I had everything planned out so that when it came to the race day, I didn't have to think about how I was going to do my warm-up, what time we were going to boat. That was already out of the way. So the only variable comes in is actually when you're racing and something happens at that point.
Yeah, and talking of warm-ups, the thing that you need to know sort of for the head of the river is your navigation stuff, where you can do your warm-ups. It can sometimes get really busy, so if you have a good stretch in front of you that's sort of quite empty, that's a really good opportunity for you to kind of get in some bursts and sort of go for it, because sometimes you think, oh, there's so many crews in front of me, I'm just not going to be able to get anything done. So if you do have that sort of straight that's empty and clear, just go for it. Go and do something that's going to be substantial to get your crew warmed up. And on that as well, make sure you know the navigation rules. Go and check out all the rules on the Head of the River website or whatever race you're racing. Check out the navigation rules, because on the way up, when you're getting to your marshalling station, there's going to be lots of different things going on. You need to make sure you know exactly how you're getting to where you need to be.
I have to say, yeah. I think that's really important. I know marshalling and stuff sounds really, really stupid. And you're just like, oh, do I need to? But actually, it's probably one of the most important things is just knowing the rules of the river, knowing what the instructions are. I can probably speak firsthand on this. Probably one of the biggest changes that I ever made in how I approach things was that for a race that I didn't properly prepare. And I didn't read all the marshalling rules. I thought I knew it. I knew the river. I'd raced on it before, and I didn't read it. As a result of that, I got the crew disqualified. And that was a huge learning experience for me because, I let down the crew, and that was a fundamental issue. But the biggest learning point from that was just how I changed my approach from then on. I made sure I made the mistake, that was it. It was a stupid mistake on my part. But from then on, I just changed how I approached all my preparation, and it became meticulous, just like the planning, reading the instructions, reading it multiple times, knowing what happens in case of bad conditions, knowing what happens as you go up to the start, knowing what happens when you go at the finish, knowing where you're marshalling. So obviously at the moment for the Eights Head, there's a lot of boats around. You know, if you're an even number, you know you have to be on Surrey. If you're an odd number, you have to go and be on Middlesex. At what point in time do you need to be above Chiswick Bridge? What areas am I allowed to go and warm up in? All these factors you should just know off by heart. And it's not because, you know, the marshals are trying to make your life difficult. They are there to go and make sure everything is safe, but most importantly, you need to know the rules so you can deliver the best for your crew.
Yeah, absolutely. You spoke about controlling all the controllables. What about the thing you can't control, the weather? What do you use to check the weather? What can you rely on? Can you rely on anything?
Don't know if
Probably
you can
not.
with the weather sometimes. I think weather's always a tricky thing. You can never fully plan for it. The best thing that I do with weather is actually sort of like scenario plan. So I'll always, in my own mind, I'll probably sort of like lie in bed before a race, and I will think of different. It's a bit sad, isn't it? Like lying in bed thinking about racing the next day. But I will generally, before I go to sleep, I'll think about all the sort of like circumstances that can come up. So if we have good water, that's great, and just enjoy it. If we've got sort of like choppy conditions, how would we respond to that? How we'll deal with that? So all those things I'm already planning about. So you can't control the weather, but it's already a process that you've thought about to try and control it as much as you can.
The only other thing that I would say about sort of planning and stuff like that is, and this sort of comes with on the day as well as maybe a bit before, but boat checks. So make sure that your heel restraints are all sort of nice and tight and they're ready to go on race day. Make sure your bow ball is very tight and secure. Your hatch covers are all there and secure and they're all good. Those kind of things you can prep weeks, months in advance even for races. But then on the day as well, you know, you've rigged up, everything's come off, you've got everything back on again. Just double check everything is tight. Like, because people will say that they've tightened their rigger, yeah, I've done it. They haven't, they actually haven't done it. So it's 100% your responsibility to go and make sure that everything is tight. Like, and even check your rudder. Make sure you check your Coxing, check all the wiring. Just check everything. That was my boat check advice. Anything else? Have I missed anything to check?
That's pretty extensive.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. One thing about the Head of the River is that it's long. It's a long race. And for people who have never been on the river before, I mean, you might just have no idea where you are. So something that is really useful is to go on sort of Google Maps or Map My Run or Mapometer, anything like that. And you can actually use something to measure the river and sort of work out roughly where things are. This is pretty accurate, but obviously it's never going to be that accurate because it depends which part of what marker you're measuring from. But it's always quite useful to sort of think, oh, okay, I know Phelan is about a K to go, the Black Boy is 500 meters to go. That kind of thing can be really useful to sort of give back to your crew, especially when they're kind of lost and confused and in pain. To hear there's a K to go left is quite nice, I can imagine. Not that I've done it, but... anything to add on that?
No, I wouldn't, but I think that, you know, measuring's a really important aspect for me because, like I said, I think, like Sophie says, it's a really long race, and if you can break the race down into smaller bite-sized markers, it's a lot easier to go and think about. So I think we'll come on to it later, but the way I always like to think of it is that first segment, the first K of the race, you know, start to Barnes, and then you've got sort of like the mid-section, which is all around, so like Chiswick Pier to Hammersmith. And then Hammersmith, even though you've just got about 2.5K to go, you're still sort of like starting to ratchet it up at that point. So yeah, it's a really good way of just like thinking about it rather than trying to take the race as just a 6.7, 6.8K race, actually just breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. And then that way you can think about what are your objectives for each section, what do you want to achieve from that section, and how you're going to approach it.
Absolutely. So, marshalling. Tell me your wise words on marshalling. It's basically all it is know where and when and how to get there, I suppose, is the top bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say with marshalling, I think we probably covered some of it. Obviously, read the instructions, and I'd say know them really well as well. Just know them backwards. I'd also, the biggest thing I'd say is always listen to the marshals. I think that's the important thing. There's a lot of activity going on. I remember like the first time I did Eight's Head, and quite a long time ago now. But when it was there, I was just amazed. I'd never gone to an event where I was just like, oh my God, there's so many crews around. Everyone's doing their own thing. Some people are rowing in 6s. Some people are rowing in all 8s. You've got people who have only been rowing for 2 years, and you've got great guys who are in the national team, and they go past and everyone's looking at them, and it's like, whoa, look at it, that guy, they're huge, and like big national boat. I remember actually the national boat coming past me. I think probably Gary, you might have been Coxing it or something, but they just make a huge amount of noise as well, and it's just like really imposing, and everyone looks around, and if you're not really paying attention and not listening to what the marshals are saying, all of a sudden you're in the back of another boat or something. So I'd say with the marshalling, read the instructions, know where you need to be, and most importantly, listen to what they say. They're there to help you. Don't look at them as the enemy. They're your friend. They're there to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that I find quite annoying as a cox is that some of the rowers get to sort of switch off when you're marshalling, but for a cox, it's probably one of the biggest moments where you have to be so switched on about everything that's going on and like constantly making sure everyone's happy and things like that. Talking of listening to the marshals, here's the marshalling area. This is last year's one because this year's isn't up on the website, I don't think yet. But make sure that you check it out because you need to know exactly where you need to be. It's quite confusing, but just make sure that you know what number you are when you start to read it, and I'm sure you can sort of figure out where you need to be at what time as well, which is also on the website.
I think just one thing on the marshalling, which is different to where normally you go on other rivers when you're doing head races and you're marshalling, or if you're doing river racing, like the water's quite stationary, it's not moving. One of the things that you notice most of when you come to the tideway and when you're just like stationary is actually how fast the stream is moving, even when you're still. So I think it's really important to be alert to that, because otherwise there's a couple of things that happen. One, the stream just pushes you backwards, and you end up being caught behind another boat, or worse than that, you could have a bridge behind you and you get caught up in the buttress. So just be prepared, just always time. It's actually quite a good thing as well for keeping the athletes warm. So I'll do it when you start drifting backwards, once you're in marshalling positions, I'll alternate between bow 4 or stern 4 or middle 4 and just make them tap up and stuff. So then you can actually incorporate it as an exercise, keep them warm. I think the other thing to remember as well is always just keep your bows pointing into the bank. So if your bows end up sort of like pushing a little bit more out into the middle of the stream when you're waiting, what actually happens is the stream pushes your bows even further. And before you know it, you're halfway out into the stream, and then problems can really come. So make sure, just keep tapping up, good exercise, keep your athletes warm. It will actually help them at the beginning of the race, and then secondly, just keep the bows pointed into the stream.
Yeah, absolutely. So penalties now. So obviously ignoring marshals, that is going to probably give you a penalty, so always listen to what they're kind of saying. Also, thinking about marshalling, warming up in the marshalling zone as well is a big no-no. So just make sure, again, that you read all the rules online about that. Other than that, it's just sort of basic things, really. Bad language, swearing, you can get a time penalty for that. Urinating in public, littering, and navigation errors as well. So just make sure that you know exactly where you're going, how you're getting there. Just read up on it all the time.
I love the urinating in public logo. It's fantastic.
Okay, does anybody have any questions about anything that we've covered so far? Any from the floor or any from the live stream?
I don't know.
Top tips?
Yeah, we should have probably said this at the beginning, but I think rather than Sophie and I just talking away and stuff, I'm quite keen that actually we can make this a bit interactive. So obviously we've got sections throughout the talk, but at the end of each sort of like section, we'll have a bit of a pause. You can throw in any comments, questions. I don't think any question is a stupid question.
No.
I'm always keen on a bit of interactive.
Absolutely. So we do have a question from the live stream. Okay.
Yeah, question from the live stream. They want to know, you mentioned you got disqualified. What did you get disqualified for? They'd like some clarity.
Oh, that's got to be one of my friends, isn't it? So that was at Kingston Head, and I was going off first. And if anyone's ever done Kingston Head, there's 2 ways to go around the island, and I went for the fastest line around the island, which was actually not the line to take. So that's why I got disqualified.
Right. Anything else? Yeah.
So either of you guys have any like lucky charms that you do before races? Like I always have a bracelet I have to wear like when I race. Do you guys ever have any?
Yeah, I do.
You do for sure.
I've got a pair of Bedford School socks, which have lasted me through every single one of my international races that I've always worn. They've got big holes in now. They lasted just about to Rio. And then the other thing I do is my stroke man, I always tap his right foot. I don't know why. A random one.
For me, I had these sort of frog socks that I wore for the boat race. They weren't that lucky, but I just thought they were kind of cool. And they ended up being quite lucky, so now they're my lucky socks. And I don't touch a foot, that's a bit weird, but I do fist bump with my stroke person, whoever it is, because we're cool. You're not.
I've got a foot fetish.
Yeah, weirdo. Anything else? No, okay, fantastic. So now we're going to move on to hopefully what you've all been waiting for, sort of going through the steering line. So we've got this really awesome video that's going to help us to sort of give you some top tips on sort of how to steer on the tideway to what we think is the fastest line. So it starts off in the marshalling area, and this is us turning as the marshal just told us to turn. So we're all turning in line and being good and listening to the marshal. And then we're going to come up to Hammersmith Bridge. So at this point, we're sort of just paddling along. You're sort of talking your crew into the race, as in, you know, get ready for it. Like, sort of,
just stop.
Yeah? Kind of just, can I stop it? Stop! We tried this earlier. There we go.
There you go.
All right.
I was going to say just a few points before we get going. So you'll be up in the starting marshalling area, and it can take anything from, if you're going off sort of like early doors, you can be off in about 5-10 minutes after the start, or you could be waiting half an hour or so. So just be prepared for that, stay warm through it. But the most important thing is just the procedure, what happens at the start. Obviously, you've just seen sort of like the boat turn around, but just before that, normally what always happens is that the marshal does give you a little bit of a warning. So you don't have to be there going, oh my God, I'm about to go, guys, take your kit off, and then they're sitting around for 20 minutes, and then they've got hypothermia before the race has even started. The marshalling, you'll be able to go and see crews going off in front of you. You'll see those coming down, so you'll have a rough idea where you are. You might be a crew 100, and you've just seen 50, so you'll know there's still quite a few crews to go. Also as well, normally the umpire will give you like a 5-10 minute warning. So at that point, you can start doing a countdown. I normally always have a watch with me, so then I'll know. And then normally with about 5 minutes to go, I always go and tell the guys then. I give them a 5-minute warning, and then that's when they start sort of like taking off their kit, you know, making sure like water bottles are secure. And I think that's really important. We don't want littering. Don't make you guys or girls like drop water bottles out.
Make
sure you're
penalty.
keeping them in. Yeah, you get a time penalty now. So just be aware of those things. And I think what you'll find as well, it's really funny. You can be marshalling up for a while, everything's really calm, and then all of a sudden it's the like, marshal's like, right, crew, whatever, go, go, go. And then all of a sudden everything is like happens really, really quickly. Everyone starts turning. You sometimes end up with another crew which is turning and blocking you a bit and everything like that. I'd say, you know, that's part of Ace Head, and actually that's what makes it a bit fun, that little bit of jostling in a way. But make sure you just stay calm for that, you know, still a few, just deep breaths, and, you know, just take those few seconds, just breathe, stay calm. You know what the process is going to be, so stay relaxed on that.
Yeah. Cool, okay.
Sorry, we recently had a race where our speakers actually filled up with water. I don't know if you've ever had this experience.
honest, it's a bit of a tricky one to mitigate because you can't exactly tell the guys to sort of like bail and everything. I generally find though, that actually like, even when the speakers start filling up with water, I still find like the Coxing still like, for me, it seems to sort of like always broadcast quite well through it. But yeah, if it just gets really bad, then I guess in a way you just have to revert to go a bit old school and shout loud.
Yeah. Okay, so about here, you want to be aiming to be in the middle of Chiswick Bridge, so you can see just at the very top of the screen that there's those two lights. It's always good to sort of aim to go pretty much exactly underneath them. I know you like to go slightly to the right of them.
Yeah. So my style, I probably got a little bit different. I think this is probably, maybe it's driven a little bit about where I normally start. I normally end up marshalling in the middle of the river when I start. But I like to be just a fraction to the right-hand side of the middle. So I'll always come slightly through the right-hand side, and then I just look to have like a straight line coming out of that.
Yeah.
Just my own preference. But yeah, you can't go wrong with sort of like middle or just the right of middle.
Yeah. So I reckon you want to be sort of building up about here now. When you get to here, I suppose if we're the Cox and we've just come out of the bridge, to your right there's going to be a boat sort of moored up to the buttress. This boat is where the guy who says, "Number 24, go." And it's basically just sort of there for you to know, okay, right, we need to seriously go now. The timing doesn't actually start until you get through the line of the university boat post, which is going to be on your left. Can you see it in there? Sort of, just about. So by this time, you want to be at race pace because you want to be going through the start line at your race pace. Yeah?
Yeah. I would say, just off the start, I'd say, best feeling in the world, actually just enjoy it in one way. It's so good going off the start. I love that moment. You've had all sort of like the storm in a way, and you know there's all things going on, and then all of a sudden you're just into the race. Big things always for me is that I always start just the other side of Chiswick Bridge, and then actually if I sort of like do the rolling start, ready, go. And then if you start that just the other side of Chiswick Bridge, then it's normally about 8 to 10 strokes before you actually hit the line. So that when you come through the line, you're then sort of like at full speed and the hull is absolutely trucking. And that's when you're sort of like high tempo, high rhythm, going for it. And I think that's for me is like really important, just like feeding off that energy off the start, really getting into the strong tempo.
Yeah.
I think way we'll sort of like talk through it, I guess we'll talk through this next section, sort of like we'll do the race in blocks. So the first block that Sophie and I are sort of like going through now is really just the start to Barnes Bridge, which is about 1.2 kilometres, I reckon, about 3 minutes 15, somewhere around those. I'm trying to remember my knowledge now. But for me, this section overall just happens really quickly. Like, it's unbelievably how quick that you get to Barnes. But really enjoy this bit because you're going down, there's other boats still marshaled, still waiting to go. You might have other crewmates who are in other boats and they'll give you a bit of a cheer. So really enjoy that, really embrace that, feed off their energy. And I always look at this, that actually, you know, this bit's where you can really go for it, particularly like the first 45, 50 seconds, you know, that's a little bit of free money when you're in the anaerobic system and you can really sort of like push down the legs, really establish the strong rhythm. You've got sort of like your over rhythm at that point, the rate's slightly higher than you'll come down the course. So, you know, you want to make the most of that and really set the platform then for like the rest of the race. That's what you're trying to do. This is like the launch pad for what you want to achieve in the rest of the race.
Yeah. Do you want to talk us through this bend then, and the approach to Barnes?
Yeah, why not?
Let's go for it.
I'm getting quite excited now. I feel like just go and come out of retirement and do a bit more racing. So I think, as a rule of thumb, I always think it's important, this first section, you want to come down the middle of the river. So it's basically middle from left bank and the right bank. And the first thing that you come up to, just in terms of your steering, will be on your left-hand side. So it's left-hand bend. And I think the really important thing around here is making sure that you don't cut the corners. I think that's like the most important thing that you do throughout this race is always just gentle turns. You don't need to ever go really hard on the rudder. It's always just about like gradual turn, little bits of steering. And that's how I'd really approach that bend. If you end up with there's a few navigation buoys which will be on your left-hand side. If you end up like close to those, you've gone too far over. So resist the temptation of cutting the corners, and actually just stay in the middle and really just take sort of like a gradual turn.
Especially here, you can see Barnes Bridge, so I think it's quite tempting to be like, oh, I'm just going to go straight for the bridge. But then you massively cut the corner and you're out of the fastest sort of stream. So yeah, just stay where you are, stay in the middle, don't cut that bend.
Exactly like this video. Exactly this view.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's difficult to tell because it's a wide angle, but yeah.
I think the line, from looking at here, it's quite. I think it's a pretty good line just coming up to the approach.
We're not super happy with the line going through the bridge, but we'll come to that.
I think here I'd be. Do you want to just pause a minute?
Pause.
So here I would probably be. I was quite happy with the approach to looking at it from here. I was quite happy with the approach, just sort of like stay in middle. I'd probably say now, maybe a little bit too much over to the left. So I'd probably want to be just a little bit further to the right as I'm approaching here. And I think at this point in the race now, I think there's a few good things to think about here. There's a lot happening here now. So you're probably just short of like 3 minutes into the race. Like at this point now, your crew are going to be in like the race rhythm. And actually, even though it's a K into the race, it comes about quite quickly. So you're in a strong rhythm. You're pumping down, and you're probably going, when I was talking about, in the pre-race and all the training you've done, you've probably like developed a number of sort of like calls and techniques. They're sort of like the things that you'll be sort of like repeating now. So I think probably back when I would be sort of like coxing this, probably a lot of our focus for a lot of our races was always around the front end. So the catches and how we were collecting it. And then probably the first quarter of the drive of how we were pushing off the foot stretcher and how we were being connected with the legs whilst the shoulders were relaxed. So probably by this point now, to go and establish the rhythm, I would have called probably about just over a minute, being on the rhythm. And then really just as coming around this next section, I would have just been really talking about the good catches, the loose shoulders, the strong first quarter of the leg drive. And that was all really just to establish that long, sustainable rhythm. When you get to this point in the course now, this is probably like the first big challenge in terms of coxing. And there's a couple of things to think about. Firstly, like steering. So here, this is like the first sort of like big bend. And if you don't get the steering right here, you end up going over to the flats on your right-hand side. And that's really sort of like slow, slack water, you're going to lose time. So you've got to make sure that coming out of Barnes, you don't come out wide. And I'll tell you in a minute how you do that. Second thing to go and think about is actually the wind conditions. So up until this point, you've probably had the same conditions. Now, this is the first point where the course changes conditions. So you've got to be prepared for the wind and what's going to happen. So just running through those 2 points in a little bit more detail. The first one, just in terms of steering, my idea is that actually if you end up just following the line of the buttresses as you come into the bridge and out of the bridge, you're going to shoot the bend wide and you're going to end up in the flats. So what you need to do is actually think about anticipating that turn. So you actually start turning when you're actually either slightly coming into Barnes or when you're in Barnes. So you're almost saying, right, rather than coming out of Barnes and turning, I'm actually going into Barnes and turning. It's a very small sort of like subtle mind shift, but what that will mean is that as soon as you come out of Barnes, you actually have a good line for the next phase of the race. You're staying in the stream, and you haven't taken that wide. So often I just see coxes at this point just following the buttresses, coming out, and they go really, really wide, and then they have to go and cut in. So you just need to really make sure, as you come in, you want to probably be in the middle of Barnes, so where the lights are in the middle of the arch, but you're already anticipating that bend, you're already coming around to your left-hand side. Second thing to think about is the wind, which I mentioned. So coming into Barnes, you've had one conditions. Coming out of Barnes, you're probably going to have another conditions. So often I've come out of Barnes and it's been really choppy. You get lots of bouncy water. But whatever you do, particularly if the conditions are like at the moment and you've got a bit of Storm Gareth coming down, I imagine it could be pretty lumpy here. As you can see, it's really exposed, and so the wind's going to chop up more. So make sure that you actually prepare your crew. So I'm always like coming out of Barnes, let's really think about just pressing out the finishes, holding it well. You don't need to obviously use the finishes. That's just something that I used to do, but whatever your crew wants or what you've discussed. But yeah, be aware of that.
Yeah, so this bit's actually a really nice straight bit. You can see there's a green navigation buoy is going to be on your left. You want to be about a blade's length away from that. So you're much closer now to those green buoys that you were before. So you're going to go past here as well on your left, what's called the bandstand, which is a bandstand. That's why it's called a bandstand, which you can just about see from the river. But yeah, it's a really nice place to kind of keep really straight, absolutely minimum rudder sort of movements, and you want to be, like a blade length away from that buoy. The sort of flat here, you can see it's like super shallow on that side of the river, and that's kind of where the slowest water is. Also, by the way, if the conditions are like this on the day, it's an absolute miracle. Don't expect it to look like this, because it 99% of the time doesn't.
This is fake news.
This
you
is
never see the
absolute
conditions
fake
like
news.
this.
So you're coming down here, you're about a blade's length away from that green buoy there. And it's just...
Can I
just
chip in?
Yeah.
God, I'm getting all excited, I remember all the things. So I think what you need to remember just in terms of sort of like phases of the race. So we've had the excitement and the build up at the start where you're just racing from Chiswick to Barnes. The next section, once you've sort of like gone through Barnes, realistically you're only sort of like 1.2, 1.4, probably about 1.5k into the race here. And all of a sudden you've gone from the excitement of having loads and loads of boats around you cheering to all of a sudden it just goes, it goes really quiet. It's like really unbelievable. It goes quiet, you're just in a much more bigger open space, there's not so many landmarks to go. And for me then, this next phase is a really critical phase. I don't think you're never going to win, or you're never going to have a best result by just hitting it really hard here. But the really important thing is just really having, I guess for me, I always think of it as like a relentless mentality. It's quite easy in a mindset to just say, oh, we've still got a long way to go, let's wait for the second half of the race, let's wait till we get to Hammersmith and familiar sites. I think it's really important. I always think of it as, it's like keeping the foot on the gas. You're not going to win it, but you can potentially lose seconds. You can give a second away to a crew. So it's just about really being relentless, keep driving the guys on. I probably, at this point, if I'm honest, I'll change the tone of voice. So probably at the beginning of the race, you're like feeding a lot of energy, you're really trying to drive that high tempo rhythm. And now through this bit, it's probably a little bit softer and you're a little bit calmer in what you do. You're talking a lot more about rhythm, but it's really about being sort of like a crushing, devastating rhythm. And one of the things that I used to do here when I'd race is the best thing now is like, like GPS devices. So like the COTS Orb, it has like a GPS on it. And by this point, you're on to sort of like a steady rhythm pace. That could be anything, I guess, from about 115 to 130, say, depending on sort of like the standard of the crew. But you will have probably set goals for what you want to achieve and other crews that you wanted to beat. And I would always look at the GPS and I'd say, right, we're into our base rhythm now. Say, for example, it's 120 pace. Now, at that point, that's when you just want to stay on that relentless 120 pace. If all of a sudden the pace started dropping off and we'd be like 121 or 122, I'd remember the guys, you know, it's not about winning it now, but it's making sure that we're not giving seconds away. So I would be there saying, you know, speed's probably, obviously you've got conditions that may play a part, but if the conditions remain the same and the water remains the same, and you've got no other external factors and you're dropping a second, I'd always remember the guys. I'd say, guys, you know, speed's dropped a second here. You're giving a second of advantage to Brooks. You're giving a second to Molesey. Don't allow that now. We need to keep the foot on the gas. Let's keep pushing on, and then give them direction how to do that. We want to like keep that speed by just being loose and direct with the catches, whatever that is. But it's just that mindset that you're not giving anything away. So, you know, whoever you're racing, be it Nottingham Uni, London School of Economics, whatever it is, it's about really making sure you've got that mentality that you don't give anything away. You want to be on your rhythm, keep pushing, pushing, pushing.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So, come on, let's go to sleep.
If you want, we can have a quick pause, and if anyone's got questions now, or yeah, whatever. Anyone got? If no one's got any questions, we'll
carry on for a bit.
But
Actually, we got one online that just came in. It was kind of.
it's not about going around the wrong side of the island again, is it?
Let's say you head off the start, and either you're being caught really quickly by a crew behind you. What are you going to do then? Are you going to keep it really relaxed and trying to just keep feeding the rhythm, or are you, like, just explain how you'd deal with that, being chased down really quickly before Barnes Bridge?
That's a really good one. I think some of that probably comes down to judgment. So for me personally, if I know a crew is catching me very quickly from behind, I think there's two potential reasons for that. One is that the crew behind is sort of like going over the top and they're going to burn out, so they don't need to worry about, or the other option is obviously that they're going quicker than you. So it really comes down to a bit of a judgment call. If I think the crew is actually not as good as we are and they're actually going to fade, I'll stay quite calm. If I think the crew's actually sort of like chasing down, then I will actually still, it's a fine balance. You've got to make sure that you establish your rhythm first, but then I would feed off them to try and push on. So I remember probably actually one of the first years that I was coxing at London, and we went off, and actually UL caught us really, really quickly. They did the same thing. They started off and they absolutely oversped it, and they were catching us rapidly, and they actually had over that before we were coming into Barnes Bridge. And they were really, really pushing. And at that point, I was just feeding off them. I was just like, don't let I was probably holding the line as much as I could, but then I was just like, always like pushing off them, fending them off, and I was just using that as ammunition. And we then held them all the way from Barnes to Hammersmith, where we were just always just pushing off them. And then actually UL blew after that, and we actually pulled away, which was actually quite satisfying. So even if a crew does catch you up quickly, it doesn't mean that they can overtake, and you can actually use it as a positive to sort of like feed off.
I think even if they are overtaking you, make it hard for them. Don't just, I think that's a really nice thing to say to your crew, is that like actually, you know, make this, yeah, they're overtaking us, yes, their boat speed's quicker than us, but make it as hard as possible for them and really frustrate that crew that's overtaking you, because they want to just go through you as quickly as possible. But if you make it really hard, it's kind of almost another sort of goal for your crew, which I think is really nice to sort of work with for sort of 2 minutes or more. Yeah.
On the flip side of that, if you are, for example, coming through Barnes and you can see that there are crews that you're kind of chasing down and you're catching them, how do you kind of stay calm and focus on your crew and steer the line and try and navigate other people while still
use it. Use the energy, but you have to, I think for me, it's all about sort of, you have to change your tone of voice. So you might go sort of quite calm for a bit and say, okay, we're chasing this crew, we're gaining on them, 2 lengths till this crew. And then, maybe you say, we're going to go for this technical call for 20 strokes or whatever it is that you've sort of practiced in training. And then maybe after that 5-10 strokes, then you start to sort of increase your intensity and you say, right, we're moving, and sort of build the excitement up until you can sort of, then maybe your bow man can hear them, and then you can be like, okay, bow pair can hear them, I think you kind of have to, it's almost like acting, you have to sort of build it and kind of, yeah, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's a really
good question.
Really good question. What do you do if you're overtaking quite early on and there's a lot of sort of like action going on? I generally think if you're overtaking someone and you're gaining quite quickly, you should take a lot of confidence from the fact that you've got faster boat speed. So you don't need to get overexcited in a way, because you're confident that your whole speed is quicker. Your guys or girls are doing the right thing, and you need to just reinforce to them, we're catching another crew, and particularly when you start coming alongside them, you say, we've already caught them, we have a lot of confidence in the rhythm you're doing. You don't need to change it at the moment, just trust the rhythm, keep doing what you're doing, we've caught them already by 2-3 lengths doing what we do. If then they start holding, then you can either think about what's going on, so you can understand, you'll hear the other cohorts and they might be doing sort of like mini pushes or efforts to try and do on, and then I think then it comes down to a little bit of judgment where you say, actually, are they just going to burn out and we're going to get through quickly, or if we're sticking, then that's the point where you just say, look, let's not just stick with them now, let's go and actually make a concerted effort to change. And then you call it. I think the most important thing though with all overtaking is being decisive about what you're doing and giving really, really sort of like clear instructions and clear guidance. So that is one, actually your steering line. So when you're trying to overtake, because the person in front is not a mind reader and they don't know what. So if you're weaving all over the shop, they don't know what line you're going to take. So be really clear on the line. Hold that line, and then they know exactly where you're going, and then you need to be clear with your crew, because you've got 9 minds in the boat, and they're also going to be thinking their own thing. So some of the people in the boat might be going, oh, I'm going to give it some big ones now to try and get past. Other people will be thinking, oh, I'm in a sweet rhythm, we're going really well, I'll just keep doing the same, and then that's where you become fragmented. So as the cots in the boat, it's all about just giving clear direction. So if you're confident that you're just going to get through with like a really strong rhythm, just, make that really clear. Just be really confident and just say, we are in a really good rhythm. We don't need to change anything now. Just trust the rhythm that we're doing. And then if you then need to make an effort call, then you can go and call it. But it's just being really, really clear about that. I think that's the most important thing.
I think also a big thing about, about the sort of overtaking and steering is, number one, being decisive, but that decision has to sort of be, made by thinking about what you want to do next in your steering line. So, for example, if you were overtaking, but you knew that in, the next bend you needed to be on the right-hand side, you'd probably want to get your bows on the right-hand side of the crew overtaking so that you can make sure that you're going to get the line that you want. And also just make sure that you know that the crew in front of you that you're overtaking, that they know what you're doing. So you can shout through your mic, number 168, move to your stroke side, or move to your bow side. Like, give them an instruction that will definitely make sure that you get the line that you want, basically.
Don't swear.
And don't swear. I did that once. And got a 6-second time penalty. But we still won, so it was fine. But it wasn't very good. Okay.
Oh, I think we've got one more question from the audience.
So just going back to the start. So Phelan, you mentioned setting a really good rhythm off the start and using that free energy. But then you also touched on, I think it was UL, going too hard and sort of blowing up near the end of the race. How do you control that as a Cox? If you've got a very excited crew, how do you know when they've gone too hard at the start, and how do you sort of rein them back when you need to?
I think some of it will probably come down to training and practice. So if you train with the crew quite a lot, you understand what is capable and what's not capable. You'll also understand as well what your race pace rhythm is. So as a guide for me, I always knew that our race pace rhythm, because of what we'd done in training, was always around about 35 and a half. So if I knew coming through Barnes and we were doing 36 and a half or something like that, I think probably one, you'd probably just feel it in the boat because it just doesn't feel quite right. But actually but the other indicator is that probably the rates are just a little bit high. So actually at that point, I would probably I'd never probably say, right, we're too high on the rate, drop it one. But I would probably, you try and control it through your voice, so you're much more talking about just staying loose, staying relaxed, and I'd be just more about this, just find that nice rhythm, stay loose, keep the shoulders loose, just keep trusting the legs, and then when it starts to click, that's always the point when I'm just like, yeah, that's the rhythm I want, good rhythm, and then we just keep reinforcing that, and then it's just that really clear point when it's just like, yeah, that's a rhythm. Enjoy it now.
All right, let's carry on down the river. Oh no! Oh man. Okay, well, we're not carrying on. We're just gonna go to here.
Oh, we talked about this. So next phase.
There we go.
Here we go.
So we're coming up to Chiswick Pier now.
Yeah. So I'd say this is like the next phase of the race. Really thinking about sort of like Chiswick Pier all the way through to sort of like St. Paul's Way. And for me now, this is sort of like the big bend in the race. So really thinking about, we're sort of like in the mid-pace now. We're just really thinking about a good rhythm. And this is sort of like the big Surrey bend that everyone talks about. This is on the right-hand side. And I think the really important things to remember here, sort of like one is, again, steering and wind. So steering-wise, again, really important that you don't cut the bend. So you've got to really think about just being in the middle of the river.
Oh, what is going on?
Oh, technical issues. But we'll just carry on. So it's really thinking about being in the middle of the river. And then when I mean like middle of the river, it's really from bank to bank middle. And it's about, again, round that big Surrey bend, as you come around here, it's just like following the bend gradually around. I think it's really important here that you don't get tempted to sort of like cut the corners. And I think it's probably like there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, big reason, don't cut the corner because you're just going to slow your crew down. You're going to be out the stream. But I think there's also like a safety bit about it as well, in the fact that there will be, perhaps when you're racing, there will be returning crews, or there'll be crews still marshalling. And actually, if you end up cutting it, you can potentially have sort of like an accident. There was an accident, I know, sort of like around that area last year. So just be aware of that. Here we are. And when I say middle to middle, you have to really sort of like ignore the boats. Don't think of it as middle being from the pier and the boats to the bank. It's really about being from bank to bank middle. That's really important. And I think as a rule of thumb for steering, you can never go wrong if you always think about the first part of the race, so really from Barnes all the way through to Hammersmith, you want to be in the middle of the river. And then that's like a really good, general, easy to remember rule of thumb. And then the second half of the race, from Hammersmith to the finish, which we'll talk a little bit in a minute about, there you're just really thinking about 2/3, 1/3 rule. But that first half, be in the middle, and you're in a good position. Again, do you want to risk pausing it? So. don't know, joys of technology. Again here, just always remember as well, when you go round the big sort of like Surrey bend, if you look on sort of like the actual map of it, it's actually a huge bend. And again, as you sort of like start going around that bend and you go along the A-ut, actually there again, be aware of the change in conditions. I always think around the A-ut, normally on race day, you end up with two scenarios at the A-ut. Either it's really, really choppy and you get a lot of headwind, or it's absolutely calm, flat as a pancake, which normally just lulls you into a false sense of storm, and actually then the second half of the race is horrible. But again, just really think about those coping mechanisms. So with your crew in training, you know, think about the scenarios. What do I say to the crew when we get bad water? How do we sort of like nullify that? Is it about making sure that we hold on to the finishes? Is it about staying relaxed in our bodies? Is it about pushing hard on the legs? Whatever those sort of like triggers are, just really think about that. I almost think of, generally when you're like coxing and a crew, I always like to think I've probably got like 5 key calls, and they're almost like magic buttons. So if I was flying a jet fighter or something, I've got like a few buttons on my dashboard, and one of them's like my guns, and one of them's my missiles and everything like that. But in a way, like some of coxing and doing calls is a little bit like that. So if you want to increase the hull speed, I'll have sort of like a catches call, or it might be a squeeze the legs call. If the boat's becoming a bit raggedy and we're going through bad chop, I'll think about sort of like pressing out the finishes. If the boat's feeling a little bit heavy and the rate's dropping, I'll want to think about having sort of like relaxed bodies and keeping the hands moving. So in a way, you've got these sort of like magic calls that you will have practiced in training, and they're like your arsenal in a way. So, you know, you've got them on hand. So as I'm coming around the A, it's choppy water. I know that's like the finishes call. If I want to speed up the boat, I know it's the catches call. If I want to just keep the rhythm, keep the flow, I know it's like the hands and the shoulders. So it's just like having those sort of like weapons at your disposal that you can just sort of like press quite easily.
So again, this is kind of, you're in the middle of the river, bank to bank, but remember this bank is an island, so it doesn't count as a bank. So you're going to be closer to the island than you are to the bank on your right-hand side, if that makes sense. So we're coming up to the end of the island now. So this is roughly about halfway. So as you sort of push off the end of the island, that's a really nice call to make for your cruise. It's like, okay, we're coming up to halfway, or we're literally just about to pass halfway. So, you know, kind of dig deep again. Sort of, it's quite a nice motivational thing for your crew to hear. Again, as you keep coming around this bend, so we're still on the same bend, you want to follow the shape of the inside bend, which is the one on your right-hand side. So you're still just sort of nice, gentle kind of stuff, gentle touches on your rudder, just keeping it nice and smooth all the way around this bank. And as we are coming up, you can see there's Latimer on your left, and then coming a bit more around, we've got St. Paul's on your right, and that's a really big, here it starts to get quite loud again. So it's quite nice to kind of use those cheers and kind of, even if you know that they're not cheering for you, it's a really nice thing to say like, okay, you know, guys, people are cheering for you, and just sort of make it up. And they don't know if they're cheering for you or not, but it's great to use. I don't know. Do you do that? Probably not.
I probably don't do that. I probably stay in my boat a little bit more. But particularly sort of like, I probably use it at Hammersmith. But St. Paul's, when you hit St. Paul's, you've got 500 metres to go to Hammersmith.
Yes, so we've just hit St. Paul's.
And then
got Dove Pier on your left as well.
And then actually St. Paul's, I'm starting to think about the prep for Hammersmith. So there'll be sort of like, you're doing like a gradual turn on the rudder. I think more so than anywhere else, I always see this bend, which is caught. People end up being too far over to the right-hand side, too close to Hammersmith at that point. So just again, you're just gradually coming around. But now I'm starting to get ready to change conditions. So again, I'm just prepping the crew up for, this is almost like now you start sort of like thinking about the build, not really building to the finish, but you're just starting to drive a bit more momentum. So here I'm just like, again, it's probably the last time I'm really sort of like reinforcing like the strong rhythm. Coming up to St. Paul's, I'm like, guys, St. Paul's now 500 metres to Hammersmith. Yeah, this is feeling good. We are in a really good shape now to attack the second half. Just sort of like elements like that, really.
It's really nice to use Hammersmith as a sort of build in and build out, if that makes sense. So you can sort of, 20 strokes into Hammersmith, 20 strokes out of Hammersmith. It's like, it's just a nice thing, especially because when you go out of Hammersmith, the rowers can see the bridge sort of moving away. So I always feel like that's quite a nice thing to sort of say, like, push it away, move off the bridge, that kind of thing. Yeah, do you want to talk about the approach into Hammersmith?
Yeah.
It's quite similar to Barnes in a way, sort of.
It is. I think one thing I think actually, Sophie's point just about the catches in, catches out, but it just reminds me, like, always think about, we talked about like sections of the race, but think of it in like what objectives you want to do. So you always think about, so for me, the objective from start to Barnes is about being punchy out the start, getting the strong rhythm. And then the next phase of the race, really from sort of like after Barnes, all the way through to Chiswick Ayot, for me, that is just like, this is a relentless crushing rhythm. We are setting the tempo. We're not overspeeding it, but we're on like a strong, sustainable, relentless rhythm which we can build on in the second half of the race. And then I always find then, when you sort of like come around sort of like Chiswick Ayot, you sort of like reached halfway. So on one way you've got halfway, but again, it's still really quite quiet from there. There's not really any boats marshalling. It's quite a big open space. Again, I think there you've got to really think about what your objectives are, what you want to go and achieve from there. There, I'm actually, particularly along sort of like the Ayot and around to St. Paul's, I have quite a technical focus for me, and that's because I'm wanting to think about setting a platform, because in the second half of the race, from Hammersmith on, I want to build. So I've had punchy start, I've then had sort of like the platform of the middle of the race, and then from Barnes in, I'm wanting to build momentum. So before I get to Hammersmith, from the end of the island to around St. Paul's, I'm really making sure that we've got the foundations, we've got a really strong platform that we can attack off, that we can build on. I think also as well, realistically, if you're doing in a race, this is a point where actually you sometimes get quite a lot of action, there's like some overtaking. I remember one year actually starting quite low with a women's crew, and we seemed to be overtaking about 20 crews at this point, and it was really good fun, it was really exciting. So yeah, just really think about those objectives. I think that's a big point. And then now, as Sophie just mentioned, just like the approach to Hammersmith, I think again, everyone probably knows this bit more than everything else is the second lamppost. And whenever you say second lamppost, always make sure it's a second lamppost on the right. I say that only because one of my mates was telling me the first day he did this with his student crew, they had told the cots second lamppost, but they had said she thought it was second lamppost on the left. And so actually swung miles around on the outside of Hammersmith Bridge, which is particularly slow. So always think a second lamppost on the right-hand side. But again, similarly to Barnes, make sure that you're not doing your turn out of Hammersmith afterwards. So again, just really think about, because the bend now is sweeping over to the right, you want to start completing your turn again as you're in Hammersmith. So I'm thinking about turning.
Why does it keep doing that?
Oh dear. Young people don't know how to use mouses.
It's your mouse.
So, yeah. So I think really important, we're going into Hammersmith Bridge and you're actually starting to anticipate that turn then. Maybe I'll just talk quicker and then we don't need to pause it.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, so this is actually Kieran who filmed this and did this. He took a good line here. Well done, Kieran. So just coming in here, second lamppost, you can see it above, and then actually you're really thinking about completing your turn coming in, because then this sets you up for the next part of the race. And we talked about being half and half in terms of positioning. Now we want to think about 2/3, 1/3. So you want 1/3 to your right-hand side, 2/3 to your left-hand side. And that's a really good sort of like rule of thumb now, just sort of like to take you on for the rest of the race. And then this next segment now is where you're just really building momentum. You fed off the energy off Hammersmith Bridge, you get loads of cheering, everyone's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you can really feed off that energy, and now you're sort of like into the next phase, really take it on.
Yeah, you can see on your right-hand side now you've got the red navigation buoys. You want to be about a blade's length away from them again now. So like Phelan said, it's 1/3 of the river on this side, 2/3 on that side. So just be aware of those red buoys, because sometimes they just come out of the middle of nowhere, especially if you don't quite know where they are. Also be aware that there's going to be like returning crews coming up on the inside here. So it's just something to just acknowledge, and as long as you're on the right-hand side of these red buoys, you're not going to have a collision unless they're in the wrong. So just make sure you're aware of that. But yeah, so here you can see we're coming up to this other red buoy. So you're quite close to it, so just be aware of that. And then we're coming up now to the milepost. So we're really kind of coming into the last sort of section of the race. So the milepost is a really hard thing to find when you're on the river, but it's just a little post thing on the right-hand side bank, and it's about a 1.5k to the finish. So you basically just keep following this line, and you're kind of just trying to keep your crew motivated, because now you're really starting to think about the finish. And I think it's similar to like what you said at kind of just after Barnes. It's like you can't win the race here necessarily, but you can definitely lose it. Does that make sense?
Do you want to just risk pausing it a minute? That's like, go on.
You're lost.
Camel. Big thing I'd say is don't worry about if you don't see it on the milepost. I think I've done so many races,
you never know where it is.
And the milepost will like goes past you. If you like looking for it too much, you easily miss it. I think for me, the really good references is that I use like Harrods. So Harrods is about 2k to go, and what I generally do is I'm a big believer in GPS now. GPS makes life so much easier. And actually using the GPS, so, you know, like Coxorbs or GPS watches, they've all got sort of like distances on. So you can always use that now to sort of like track your distance in. So I'm always like, yeah, I've got 2k to go, and then you can do, there's another 500, so then you've got 1500 to go, then you know you've got a k to go, and then you've got 500 to go. And so you can almost approach it like that. So I would, don't get hung up. I know like loads of people are like, look for the milepost, but on race day, when there's a lot of action going on, it's something really quite easy to miss. And so a much better way of sort of like getting around that issue is just to use GPS and like really feed off the markers. And actually now, I always think, probably sort of like from the end of Harrods, I'm always now like, yeah, let's start to sort of like turn the screw a little bit. And you think of it almost as, you know, like a dial on a stereo or something like that for a bit of volume. It's just.
Who are you?
Well, I am a bit older. Okay. But just really think about just dialing it up a little bit. So Harrods in, you've always had like a steady rhythm, and then you're sort of like starting to build it. So I would always look for a little bit more like half a pip of rate. And then I want to like sustain that half pip of rate probably for the next K. So that's going to take me through to like Barn Elms. So perhaps, you know, whatever your crew, you might be doing 32. And then actually now after Hammersmith, because of all the noise, your crew's probably gone up maybe 32.5. And then from like Harrods to Barn Elms, I'm probably like, let's turn the dial a little bit. And now you're like 33 and you're starting to build momentum. You want to be like a diesel train or something like that, and you're just like feeding the coal, building the momentum, and you're like trucking. You're just like this relentless crew now, just building to the line. Loving it at the back. Love my metaphors.
Talking of Barn Elms, let's go to Barn Elms, shall we?
So from Barn Elms, you've got about a K to go, and actually that last K then will just happen really quite quickly. So even though, because you've got so much stream, you're just moving a lot quicker than you would do sort of like a 1K on a course. And so you can really build There's a few steering points. Do you want to do those things?
So if you don't know what Barn Elms is, you can see it on the right-hand side. It's like that boathouse there. It's basically pretty much directly opposite the Fulham Football Club, which is on the left. So as you come round, again, there's just a gradual bend. But the big key thing here is that in front of the Fulham Football Club on that side of the river it's really, really shallow, and it's called the Fulham Flats. And basically, the reason that we don't go there is because it's so shallow. It's like the slowest part of the river, okay? So you always want to keep that just 1/3 to your right, 2/3 to your left. So we've just gone past Barn Elms, so we're just less than a K to go now. I'm going to try and pause it. Where's my mouse?
Yeah, I think that is the big thing. I'll watch on race day. I normally stand around here. So many crews are already over at Fulham Football Club. They almost look like they want to actually go and watch the game or something.
Don't cut the bend.
But really resist that. The temptation is obviously that you want to cut the bend, but don't do that. Really make sure you're really disciplined in the fact that you want to be to that right-hand side. You want to have 2/3 of the river to your left. And even though it feels a bit unnatural, the water is so much quicker. So often I've seen like a crew just coming up on the inside, and then you just see 3 or 4 crews just on the outside whiz past.
Overtake, yeah.
And then all their crew are like, what's going on here? And then it's like, yeah, you're just in sort of like slow, slack water. So just remember that. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So once we've gone past Barn Elms and the football club, we're coming now towards the Black Boy, which is about here. This is a big hazard, so just really be aware of it, okay? It's 500 meters to go as well to the finish line, which is a really useful thing to know. So we're just coming up to it now. It's going to pass us on our right-hand side. And you can see now we're still pretty much got that sort of 1/3, 2/3 kind of thing going on, perhaps a little bit more in the middle. But you can see here's the Black Boy now. It's that big sort of cylinder thing. So it's 500 meters to go to the finish. So we're keeping about, what would you say, from those boats?
I think if I'm looking at this video now, I think probably the boat is too far.
I would say.
You want to be closer to the moored boats
to those lines, yeah. So I would say you want to be a little bit closer to the line of boats here. London Rowing Club is about 300 meters to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where we are now, 300 meters. So this is where you can really start sort of like turning the screw.
Ramp it
Black
up,
Boy,
ramp it
500. Here is 300. When you go past sort of like Chaz and the Hard, which we've just gone past, that's about 200. And now, as you approach the pier, that's probably about 100 meters, about 10 strokes. So just remember, like Women's Head finishes at the pier, and Men's Head finishes past the pier, actually at the boat race start. So always remember that. If you wind down, you're going to lose a few sort of like seconds, and your crew's not going to be happy for it.
And then here we're just going straight into the middle arch. And so I reckon we're just about to pass the finish line now. Oh yeah, and the boat stopped.
There you go.
So at the finish, don't stop. You have to keep going through both bridges. There'll be loads of marshals shouting at you here. Make sure that you listen up. I know that your crew's going to be exhausted, but you just need to make sure that they just keep moving, up and down, up and down. Doesn't need to be hard, just keep moving. Of course, you will be moving with the stream anyway, but you just need to get through Putney Bridge and then Fulham Railway Bridge, and there'll be marshals on the other side of Fulham that are going to turn you to spin immediately. Once you've spun, you can start to put kit on. It's a really good idea to just keep everyone moving because there's so many boats coming through, so kind of maybe go through the sixes, roll through sixes so that you've got a pair kind of putting kit on at a time and getting some drinks and sort of fluid inside them. The one big thing to mention is that as you come past Putney Pier, there's actually going to be a line of buoys going around it because that's how returning crews come back up. So they go around the pier. So just be aware that it's going to be sort of a sort of little bit where crews are coming back around. So you just need to make sure you keep slightly wide of that and avoid that at all costs. Once you've spun, you need to make your way back towards wherever your host club is or your actual club. So these are the sort of tips for the finish. basically just keep moving as much as possible, because if you stop, everyone else stops, and you just make a big traffic jam, but then you never stop actually, because the stream's always moving you around, so it creates problems, and it's just better off to just keep moving, and you'll just avoid all the hazards, really. And then the final thing to say about sort of the finish line is just to make sure that you know how to get back safely to wherever you boated from, and just be aware, again, of everything around you. If you are in the sort of much higher divisions, maybe Division 4, is there a Division 5 this year?
And 6.
And 6.
And 7.
And 7, okay. So if you're in those much later divisions, you will need boat lights to return to your host club, especially if you're going all the way back up to Chiswick. It's going to be dark by then, because it's England and cold and dark. Did I miss anything there?
No, you've been quite sensitive. I would just say, like, the big thing for me is that these races are awesome. Like, I've done like a few races over the years, and still one of the favourite races is always this race, because it's so different from like doing a 2K where you're just going straight up. You know, it's a proper indicator of your abilities. It's a great way of testing you. It's a long race. It's one of the few opportunities where you can get a national crew racing against a crew who's just been racing for a year, and you just benchmark. It's awesome. It's loads of fun. Really enjoy it. Plan it properly and just have like clear ideas of how you're going to tackle each section. I was just thinking about that last section, and you know, you've got 500 meters to go from the black buoy, and I would say don't be worried at that point if you're getting excited. You know, you're near the end of the race, you're trying to build momentum. It's okay to get excited, but get excited in a structured way. So the way I'd always think about like the finish in a way, I always break it down into sort of like bite-sized blocks. So 500 meters to go, I normally do like 2:15s. One of those is about like catches, one of those is about legs, and that's really to try and just like push up the whole speed. And then when you get to like London Rowing Club, you've got like 300 meters to go. You've only probably got like 30, 35 strokes. And then you can just break it down the classic way of doing it into like 3:10s if you want. And then, you know, it's just about like 10, really making sure that you keep recycling the rhythm. 10, really using the backs. And then the last 10 is just like kitchen sink, whatever you put into it. But, you know, so I think don't be worried. I've talked a lot about being, you know, controlled a bit. But, you know, don't worry about getting excited and really enjoying it. And actually, it's really good to show passion. I really hate it if you see a Coxing. It's just a bit like, yeah. But make sure that passion is channeled in a structured way. So you've always got a plan for everything. So you could, you know, like now, if I had to, I could still write down a race plan of how I wanted to do it, and I could break it down. I'd have focuses for every bit. I'd know my distances. And I think as well, what's really important with that race plan is don't internalize it and just keep it to yourself. I think one is to talk it through with your coach. And I think as well, you know, sit down with your crew and actually talk about it and go through it. It seems quite scary to do. I remember the first time I did it, and actually on one level, it seems a bit scary. But actually, it's a really good thing to do, because it's about bringing everyone on the same page. And if you think about it, when you do exercise, by the time you're sort of like 3/4 through a race, you can't really think that clearly, and you're just trying to struggle to keep going. So if you're trying to bring something new to the rowers, it's really hard. So you need to tell them what you're going to do in advance. So, you know, I remember being at London, and we used to sort of like sit down on a Wednesday before the race, and we'd have a crew pasta, and after the crew pasta, we'd then like sit down and we'd talk about the race. I'd normally, I'm a bit geeky and nerdy, but I would print off the map, and I would have all the markers down, and then for each phase of the race, I'd have like a little speech bubble of what the objectives were, what the key points were, and then I would also have another crib sheet, which would be saying, we are starting, you know, 10th, 2 crews above you is this, 2 crews behind you are this. And I'd also have like the timings, and I'd have, you know, I'd have everything down. So I think one, for me, it shows that it was good for me because I'd planned it properly. but also as well, it just gives reassurance to the crew that you're not just like some cowboy who's going to wing it on the day. You know, you've already done that. And it's a really good sort of like exercise to do. And actually you sit down and sometimes one of the athletes will just say, oh, I think that's rubbish, I don't want to do that. What about this in training? And then actually you've still got time, because you're not doing it last minute, you're not doing it on the day, you've still got time to sort of like refine it and do different calls. And I think that's really good to do, just have that open, you know, conversation and, you know, I'd say never be afraid of that. I think even, you know, I look back to the last sort of like, actually I can't say the last proper race because the multi-leg ends will kill me if I say that, but when I was doing Vet's Head. But in Rio, even before we'd done our heat and even going into the final, we used to sit down, we would review the race. People would be critical of calls I'd made, or they would say, actually, let's try something different. I didn't feel that worked, or they didn't quite understand something. So again, we would just go and refine it over the time so that come like the final or the big race, we were all really clear on that page of what we wanted to deliver at every single moment. And I think that's the thing. The biggest things I would say is being prepared, being structured, communicating with your crew, and that will give you the best possible outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the one thing is that feedback is what makes you as a Cox. If you can take feedback and take on board and change things, you're just going to grow and grow and grow and build your skills and generally just have a way better race, because you've taken on everything that people have told you about what they like and what they don't like, and actually that's just going to make everyone happier and just make you have just a better row in general, and you're going to feel more confident because you're doing things that people like. So yeah, never be afraid to ask for feedback. And on that, it's really useful to sort of record yourself as well and listen back to it, and you can send it to people and share it with your Coxing friends or with your coach, or all of that kind of stuff is just so useful. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have a recorder or you've never done it before because it's really weird and scary, go for it. It is really weird, but it's so worth it.
We've done quite a lot of talking.
Yeah.
But I don't know if probably everyone's a bit bored of hearing us
I
now.
agree.
But
I'm sure
if
there's loads of questions.
Any last questions? We're happy. We're happy to roll.
That's the finish. Oh, and don't do that.
That's when it goes very wrong.
If you have a question, we've got a mic that will come round. So questions on the floor. Your hand up.
So you talk about the weather playing quite a big part on the tideway. Does the weather ever change your steering or the course that you take?
Yes.
Go on, you do that. Boat race, lots of experience.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever seen I don't know, when was it, the 2016 women's boat race where they sank? Basically, if you ever get conditions like that, I would highly recommend that you do, within reason, go into the bank, because obviously it's going to be easier. But having said that, if it's that bad, the race will probably be cancelled, because obviously you can't actually go into the bank because there's returning crews coming up. So if it's like that, I think actually it probably won't change your course that much, because at the end of the day the race will just be cancelled because it would be too much. I think in terms of, it's difficult to say, because it might be, I can't think of an example of where it would be.
I think, to be honest, for Eights Head, probably, you know, the conditions should probably always be like in the middle, and if they were so bad you needed to be on the bank, it would be cancelled. So. So,
Really?
you know, it's probably like 2.5 widths that you can still, it's reasonably pretty strong. So if you don't get the perfect line, you know, don't stress too much about it. You know, the boat race, they get 2 across and it's perfectly fine. So, yeah.
I think also if a crew is massively obscuring you, although it might need an umpire to confirm this, if a crew is massively obscuring you, can you get them potentially to have a time penalty if they didn't move?
do.
That's the thing, isn't it?
If you think you're being impeded, what you can do at the end of the race is find a marshal and discuss it with them and let them know what happened.
Yeah.
I would not recommend that, say the crew won't get out of your way, that you don't go and hit them and
No.
go well, you know.
But if you have to go properly round them, you could say, oh, number 286 didn't move out my way, and I believe it cost me a few seconds.
Of course, who are umpires who will watch it, so chances are they'll see it and report it before you do. So make a note of what their crew number is, what your crew number is. Go find a marshal when you land and say, I want to report some interference. They may or may not get a penalty, that's up to the discretion of the chief umpire, but what won't happen is you won't get your time reduced. So if you say to them, it took me 10 seconds to get round, you won't give you 10 seconds back. Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
So just going back to conditions on the day again, you talked about how the conditions change as you move around the course.
Yep.
How would you sort of plan to deal with different conditions as you know a condition change is coming up as you're sort of transitioning into a headwind? Would you make any specific calls or would you change anything in the way that you were tackling your crew for that? Would you warn them that there was...
Yeah. So just like the question being just around what you do with all the weather conditions. So I think the first thing that I always do when I think about the weather is if you take sort of like the head of the river map, and the first thing you can do there is you know which wind direction is coming from. You can look at a weather forecast. So normally I'll have the map, and if I know the wind's coming in that direction, I'll run that over the course, so you know exactly, even before you're going out, you'll know on race day what sections of the course are likely to have a tailwind, what sections are likely to have a headwind. And then in terms of how you tackle that, generally I'll always think with tailwind conditions, you know, it makes the hull go faster, so you want to think about picking it up on the front end a little bit more, just a little bit more emphasis on the catches and on that first sort of like third of the dry phase. And then when you've got like choppy water where it's like lumpy and riggers are getting stuck in and stuff, I think the focus is a lot more about the finish. So really making sure that it's clean out at the finish, making sure that it's not getting caught. So everyone's just holding on to the finish and then stepping out cleanly. So that means there's like a big shape. And then I think the final thing with going into like big headwinds, it's really easy to get to a situation where you end up being like really tense in the upper body because you're like into the headwind, and then all of a sudden everything gets very army, very shouldery, and the legs stop working. So it's making sure in the final step in that headwind, it's just keeping it loose in the shoulders, keeping it low below the rigger line. Does that answer?
Yeah, and then just in terms of sort of preparing your crew for that, what kind of calls would you make when you knew a headwind section was coming up?
So I would definitely warn them, and then because we will have practiced it in training, I would just say tailwind conditions, let's really think about being loose, picking it up, ready, go. And then if you're going into sort of like big choppy way, it might be let's really make sure that we're stepping out cleanly, let's think about that shape at the finish, ready, go. And then you just talk it like shape. And then when you're happy with it, and if you think there's been like the change, you're like, yeah, that's good now. That's the shape I want. Keep this.
Any other questions?
I'm getting all excited. I feel like I
I
do want to go out and
race now. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Phelan, I'm going to come and sit by you because we're going to chat to people on the live stream. So if you budge up a little bit.
Oh,
I'm-
hello.
You guys.
Hi. Thanks.
Hi.
We've got a bit of an announcement to make, but before I do, first of all, I want to say thank you very much on behalf of Head of the River and Active Tools for everybody turning up tonight. And for those of you watching on the live stream as well, the discussions have been absolutely brilliant. They've been discussing your diesel train that we're putting coal into and steaming down the river. So, yeah, brilliant work. A special thanks as well to AllMarkOne for literally blowing all the fuses tonight at London Rowing Club. But we'll send you the bill for that one, guys. If you want updates about the Head of the River race, then please follow @8head on our Instagram and our Twitter. And you can keep up to date, of course, with AllMarkOne and with all their work they've got coming up for the Head. So we also want to say good luck to everybody competing at School's Head and Women's Head. And do go to AllMarkOne's pages to give your commentary words that they can do as part of their live stream on the day. So this video is going to be online probably for the next week or so, and then we'll do a highlights video and leave that on for a little bit longer. But the big news is that the Head of the River and Active Tools are actually refilming the official video for steering the tideway. So you might have seen it online. It's very 1980s. We have been filming for the last few weekends, haven't we, up and down the tideway, using our marbles a little bit. But that video, which is more of an instructional insight into Coxing the tideway, will be coming online in the next week or two. Right, I think that's it from all of us.
I've got one announcement.
Go on.
The draw's out now. It should be, hopefully. Is it?
Yes, the draw master at the back.
Been a busy day at work for me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please keep them coming in. Thank you.
Woo! Well done, guys. Thank you very much.
Cheers.